All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's hybrid meeting and presentation with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make everyone aware that this presentation is being recorded over Zoom. I am Ashley Lusher, the programs coordinator at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAK, in Los Alamos, New Mexico. I will be your moderator for tonight's talk. I want to acknowledge our wonderful members and donors for their generous support. For details about other Peak programs, please visit peaknature.org. Just a few logistics before this presentation gets started. Our presenter is going to be taking questions via the Zoom chat and from our live audience. For those of you watching from home, find the chat feature in the Zoom app menu bar. Type out your question to the Peak moderator, in parentheses Ashley, and I'll make sure that is my name in just a moment. And you can type that into the chat window anytime during the talk, and I will read them out during the Q&A at the end. Please remember that not everyone here in the room with us has a microphone, so there may be a delay when we're listening to questions from the live audience. Don't worry, we'll be back in a second and repeat the question for everyone to hear. After this talk, you will receive a short evaluation. Please take a moment to fill that out. Your input helps us improve future programs. Now I will pass this over to the Mountaineers to begin their meeting.
Is the test? Is this good? Okay. Thank you. So my name is still Sylvie Adam, this year's president for the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Welcome everybody here at the planetarium at Peak. A good crowd again. Well, I'm good. All right, she's fixing me up closer. Thank you. And welcome everybody on Zoom for another awesome program for our February meeting. Okay, I have it easy. I just get to do the agenda. So tonight we will have Norbert talking to us about Jim Strait, Tony about the 2024 climbing school program, Cecile or Juliana about the 2023 then we have trip report, and then skiing in Antarctica with Rob. So, Norbert, I think you're next. Thank you. Let me play it, see how you do.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well,
Let's come this way.
okay. So I'm here to talk about Jim Strait, a Mountaineers lifetime member who passed away in January. And Lynn and I collected some pictures and notes about Jim that we want to just briefly show you in memory tonight. I want to thank Bill Podorski for organizing this, and Jim's daughter, Susie Miller, and son, William Strait, also provided input to this. Thank you for that. Jim was our vice president in 1984, also director of the climbing school. And after that, for over 20 years, he was our expert in rigging and running the Ludwig leader fall belay exercise. He really enjoyed operating the release mechanism. I remember last May during our presentation, he was sitting right there and he smiled when I said, Jim, you had sort of a wicked sense of humor, about that device because, those of you who have been in the school know that it's very stressful to sit there waiting for that massive weight to come down. And Jim would distract you and then go wham. But he enjoyed that. More recently, he was a major contributor to the Mountaineers' history, digitizing all of our old slides. His wife, Bobby, edited the entire document for us. And very recently, last spring, Jim was here to help out with the knots class for last year's climbing school. Also in 1984, the club began doing a series of annual trips to climbing Yosemite. Jim Strait was on all or most of those, I think. Here he is in the blue shirt. And here he is on the Crux 8 pitch of the East Buttress of Middle Cathedral Rock. This is a classic photo. Looks like he's posing for the cover of that Steck and Roper book because they had the very same picture in their 50 Classic Climbs book. So he looks very, very heroic here. Also, there's Jim on the right and his partner Lou Horak next to him from a climb of Half Dome via Snake Dyke on one of those trips. Susie remembers that Jim said that climbing was his favorite way to escape because it required total concentration and focus. He said, when you've climbed 10 feet off the ground, you've forgotten the problems at the office. By the time you're 50 feet off the ground, you've forgotten that there even is an office. And I think a lot of us as climbers can relate to that pretty good. So this is Jim on the Glacier Point apron, and this is also Jim on the apron. He was an excellent climbing instructor, and Lynn remembers that he taught us how to climb friction by telling us to take little baby steps and keep your weight over your feet and your bodies away from the rock. He was very good at that, but just in case, he and Lou Horak sewed leather patches to the back of their climbing pants. And sure enough, one day we were way up on the Glacier Point apron and he started sliding. Very gracefully, he just flipped around onto his butt and slid on those patches until the rope went tight. Here's a picture that we think is Jim climbing in Yosemite. We're not quite sure, but it reminded me of the fact that on those Yosemite trips, Jim and his partners always did more pitches than anybody else. Jim had a T-shirt that said on it, "Pitch, pitch, pitch," and we thought that was very appropriate. Everybody got a kick out of that. But seriously, Lynn and I really admired his strong climbing partnerships. I think both Roy Luck and then later Lou Horak were very strong partners for him, and they had lifelong friendships. I also remembered that at the lab, Jim and his deputy, Roy Luck, built a climbing wall on one of the buildings in their area. I don't know how they got away with that, but I saw the climbing wall once and it was pretty neat. I think maybe a Tiger team did it in. And I wanted to conclude by mentioning that in honor of their father, Susie Miller and William Strait have offered to the climbing the school to have a scholarship fund that would help some of the students with their enrollment fees. I think that's really a very generous offer. Susie said that this would be a way to honor Jim's memory and encourage others to discover a passion for climbing the way that Jim did. And also, they are donating Jim's climbing equipment to the school for teaching purposes. I think these are both wonderful ideas, a great way to honor Jim's memory and also carry on his contribution to the club into the future. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking of the equipment, I have from the family a dozen of his carabiners marked with his name and his colors. As a souvenir of Jim, I'm going to go out in the car and bring him here. You're welcome to take one. They're very old-fashioned. They're perfectly usable. I'll bring them in and you can take one. I think I see another hand here.
You could have done that.
Okay, well, speaking of the climbing school, I'm Tony Taylor. I am the past president, and I, along with Evan Rose, are helping to organize the logistics for this year's climbing school. So it is going to be instruction like last year, like the successful climbing school last year. There's going to be instruction by Mountain Skills Rock Climbing Adventures. They actually are based in Taos, so most of the climbs will be near Taos. It is an outdoor class focused on safety. The dates are April 6th, so Saturdays, April 6th, 13th, 20th. We skipped the 27th because they have a conflict, and then May 4th. And if there is has to be cancellation due to weather, there is a makeup date on May 11th. It'll be mostly at Tres Piedras, but also perhaps at some other crags near Taos. So the registration is open until March 15th. The cost is $650. So to sign up, you go online, you sign up there, and then you send a check for $650 made out to the Mountaineers to Cecile James, our treasurer, and then she will put them all together and send them to Mountain Skills. So this was really successful last year. So I encourage folks, you can actually see a picture of some of the climbers during the climbing school. I encourage folks to sign up. I think we have a number of people already signed up. We have to have 7 folks to get it going. I don't think that'll be a problem. And I think there's a maximum of 25. People need to be 18 years or older. However, we will take 16 and 17-year-olds if a parent accompanies them, either as a member of the school or just during the day. And so there is a schedule, an agenda that they followed last year that seemed to work pretty well. It is basically up there, but basically you learn how to climbing movements, belays, anchors, following and removing gear, and the cleaning of sport anchors. So, but really focused on doing things safely. So, actually, I'll take any questions right now about the climbing school. I do have one more slide. Okay, next slide. And this is actually, oh, I guess I have to do that. So this is another reminder of the very generous donation from Susie Miller and William Strait for a scholarship in memory of Jim Strait. And it really is honoring his passion for the rocks and wanting to inspire others in that area. We actually just found out about this, so we are pulling together an application process, but if people are interested, send me an email. And there's a picture of Jim. So thanks again to Susie Miller and William Strait for this very generous donation to the club. Okay.
All right, so I get to be Cecile for this next slide. Cecile couldn't make it today. She's our treasurer. And she pulled together the financial report from last year on our major expenses and the budget that came in and what everything costs. So I can just run through what you're seeing here. So the income was $3,283.77, primarily in membership dues. And then the expenses were $3,351. And the position at the end of year is $16,587. And you can see the events were the biggest cost. Programs, which is this was the next. And then insurance, gear, climbing school, administrative, and taxes. So you can see the cost breakdown. And every year we have an audit, and we've got people who volunteer their time to look at how we bring in income, how we create our expenses. And this year we've got Ross Lemons and Tim Rennick and Annetta Wyrick. So thank you. It's a lot of work that they do to help us look through all the receipts, make sure that we are compliant with the expenses, and they're in the middle of doing that. So thank you for all the time that you do. Okay, so next, I think, is Jean. Okay. Next. All right, this is the time of the program where I get to talk all about all the fun trips that people have taken with the club this last month and some of our private trips. And thank you. This is the time that we'll talk about the trips that we've had this last month and the upcoming trips to convince you to go on them. But just one administrative detail first. No, not yet. It turns out we have a waiver form, a roster and a waiver form for club trips. And it turns out a lot of them are filled out in a way that no one can read them. And this is kind of a problem because you'd really want to have your emergency contact information be clearly written. So we've revised the form a little bit so the boxes are bigger for people to fill out. And we've made these really cool clipboards with stickers for trip leaders. And I'd like every trip leader to pick up one. And this will allow you to use a pen as the trip starts without writing on your cold car hood at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is a problem. So pick one up. And if you have, if you printed out a bunch of trip forms and you have them at home, recycle those and use the new ones. We've added a couple of trip forms to each clipboard, and the website links to the new form. So thank you for that. All right, it was a busy It was a great month for trips. We started out with a full moon ski led by Jan Felajovsky and Cecile Hemes on the full moon ski, which is called the Wolf Moon in January. And Mary Jorgensen and Annetta Wyrick joined along. Carrie Shimmick led a snowshoeing event up the Windsor Trail to the to Nambe Lake, which is an honorable trip. She was joined by two other mountaineers, Jessica and Maryse. Bill Podorski led what I think of as an annual trip to Monarch Pass in the Salida area for downhill skiing, for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. And he was joined by Mary Thompson, Marilyn Yeamans, Kathleen Grutzmacher, Tony Taylor, Stuart Trugman, and Evan Rose. And they had a grand time by all reports. Oh, and three others. Okay, so who were they? All right, Albuquerque folks. And we had another full moon, this time the snow moon, just a week ago, that Jan Velachovsky and Cecile Hemes led again. And this time there was a whole gang of people. Luke, Kirti, Apurv, Dave, Dogrel, Scott, Bailey, Jeremy, Sylvie. And they had a great, no clouds like the first one. So then we've had people have done wonderful trips that they've organized themselves. Rick Rubio organized a 3-day trip to Silverton Mountain, and they had awesome powder and even did some heli drops into some slopes. And Tim Rennick, Tanya Pietras, and Hugh Selby, and some California friends joined them. And Rick reports a high pucker factor. It turns out there's several Wednesday hiking groups in town, and Ann Nobile sent us some photos from one of them, and there were a couple of White Rock Canyon hiking trips this last month, the Knife Edge and the Red Dot and Blue Dot. Charlie Strauss and Michael Altair did some backcountry skiing at the Hippie Tree area in the Vail Pass area in Colorado. And
Because of the very bright blue skies, Charlie advises due to changing temperatures during the day, it's important to have glide wax and skin wax. And Charlie did another trip, also with Michael Altair and some others, a 4-day hut trip to the Iceman Hut. It's also near Vail Pass, and they had fabulous powder. There we go. And Tony Taylor and friends did a snowshoe hike up to Hartenstein Lake, which is on the way to Browns Pass west of Buena Vista. That's about a 6-mile round trip, so a real honorable trip. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. This was Tony said this was part of the Monarch trip. And then the trip coordinator forgot to submit a slide. Norbert Enslin led a group of us to the Brazos Overlook, a cross-country ski off of Highway 64, and the snow was remarkably good. And then Sylvie, Adam, and I did a day ski to Jawbone Mountain, which is also off of Highway 64, and it was just fabulous skiing. So those are all the past month, and then looking ahead, our friend Tosh has been organizing 6 a.m. in the morning, skin up Pajarito Mountain. And so Thursdays at 6 a.m., he'll be at the bottom of the Aspen Lift, and he'll have a set of Christmas lights around his neck. That's how you'll recognize him. And here, some people have been going, and you can see that the sun's actually rising now, so it's not completely in the dark. And Tosh is also sponsoring one of the events for Skiesta. This year, it's Saturday, March 16th, up at Pajarito Mountain, and it's the second annual Pajarito Skinathon, and that's a competition to do laps, skin up and ski down, on the Pussycat Run, and he's looking for both participants and volunteers. He needs some help in counting laps and such. And then in April, Bill Podorsky has another canyon trip coming up, this one out of Blanding, Utah, April 17th to 21st. He's got some nice condominiums rented in Blanding, so it'll be nice, comfortable accommodations. And you can see from these photos from a previous trip, fabulous canyons in the vicinity of Natural Bridges National Monument and other places near Blanding. And then one fellow last year took the time to do a photography safari to Canyonlands National Park. And so a lot of fun things to do, and there's room on that trip. And then the Spring Llama adventure that Bill's leading is May 5th. The trip is full, but there's no one on the waiting list. And often somebody has to drop out. So if this trip is of interest, please sign up. And if you have a trip you want to lead and you need some help to get it going, send me an email. I'm also on the Mountaineers website. You can find my email. So there we go.
All right. I think it's me again. Oh, good. Okay, so I am Juliana Fessenden, and I am the program co-chair. And so what I do, my job is to find cool stories, people who want to share their stories, their adventures to the club. And so if you have good adventures with nice pictures, interesting advice, lessons learned that you want to share, please reach out to me. I should always give you my email, but you see me on occasion when I announce these programs. So right now we've got July, August, September open this year. So if you're interested in giving a talk, please reach out. Today we've got Ron Suminsby. No, wait, Suminsby. Yes? Suminsby. who is going to talk to us about skiing Antarctica. And I learned a little bit about this trip that you might be sharing. But if not, I was told to make sure that I mention it's not only skiing, but there's snowshoeing and kayaking, and that there's people who did this trip at the age of 12 all the way to 84, a large group. And so I don't want to give too much away, but those were things I was told to definitely share, that this is a cool trip that is doable by many people with many interests. So I will hand over the mic, and we've got 45, 50 minutes. Does that give you enough time? All right. All right.
Okay. Am I on?
Yep. You're on mute right.
There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody out in Zoom land. I appreciate the invite to be back. I had a chance to speak to this group 9 or 10 years ago about a ski tour in Europe. And it's great to be back and talk about another great skiing experience in Antarctica. The story of how I got started about 5 or 6 years ago. I was out of my garage waxing skis, as one does, in the zen, probably drinking a Pabst Blue Ribbon or something. And I'm listening to a skiing podcast, and Chris Davenport, who's something of a Colorado skiing legend, who had guided this trip, was talking about it, and it just sounded amazing. So I came into the kitchen and I sat down and Googled it on the computer, and I found a guide's trip report from the previous year. And I'm just sitting here looking through the pictures, drooling. And my wife Celeste came in and looked over my shoulder and said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a ski trip to Antarctica." And she said, "Oh, do they have snowshoeing?" And I said, "Yeah, I think they do." She goes, "Oh, I'd do that." And I went, "Okay, sold. We're going to Antarctica." So I spent about 5 years planning to do this trip and trying to schedule it, and COVID intervened and whatnot. And the timing couldn't have been better. As you'll see, I'll talk about, they had just gotten a new ship. The company that does this, called Ice Axe Expeditions, and I'm wearing their shirt, but I paid good money for it. I'm not sponsored by Ice Axe, but they're a great company, and they've been at this longer than anybody. I think they first ran a trip about 20 years ago. The first attempt of the trip, the ship never left the dock. It was an old converted Russian research vessel or something with bad engines, and literally, they canceled the whole trip. A few of the guides managed to get on another trip and get down to the Antarctic Peninsula and ski, and went, "Oh man, this is the real deal. We've got to come back and do this next year." And the company's been doing it, I think, for about 17 years running now. And a number of the guides on the trip have done it many, many times. So a lot of expertise down in that region. So a little bit about, why do you want to do it? Where do you ski when you get there? How do you get there? What's the weather like? And how's the skiing? The skiing is great. I can tell you that. This is the company, Ice Axe Expeditions, that does it. If you want to go Google it. I'm not going to answer the question, how much does it cost? Because I hate to even admit that. It's an incredibly expensive trip. But I will say this. There are lots and lots of people who spend almost as much money to get to the Antarctic Peninsula and look at penguins through binoculars. The marginal cost of turning it into a ski trip or a snowshoeing trip or a kayaking trip is really not that much compared to the cost of getting yourself to Antarctica. Antarctic trips tend to be smaller ships because only the smaller ships are allowed to take people ashore. So they're more expensive for that reason. So it's kind of a trip of a lifetime. I hesitate to use that expression because once you've been there, I guarantee you will want to go back. But it's a trip you spend some time saving up for, that's for sure. So to answer the obvious question of why go there, here's three options. My personal reason being, when hell freezes over, I want to ski there too. I now actually have the goal of skiing all 7 continents. I've skied 4 of them now, and I think it's achievable to get to all 7. But for those of you that slept through fifth grade geography, Antarctica is the one on the bottom of the planet. We are up here in the Four Corners region. It's a long way away. The tourism in Antarctica, there are a few people that go to the historic huts, the Shackleton hut, the Scott hut, et cetera. Not that many. There are a handful of people that go to climb Mount Vinson because it's one of the 7 summits, but 90% of the tourism in Antarctica is all along that Antarctic Peninsula between the Pacific and the Weddell Sea, and that's because it's the closest to land. Because the Drake Passage between the tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula is the shortest crossing that gets you over to Antarctica. So that's where almost all of the cruise ships go. Getting there, it's quite the adventure. You fly out of here to Buenos Aires. In our case, we went through Miami. But it's going to take you 13 to 18 hours to get to Buenos Aires. Some people kept on going. We were very fortunate that some old friends of ours were living in Buenos Aires, so we laid over for a day and a half and had a great steak dinner and drank some really excellent Merlot on our way, or excuse me, our really excellent Malbec on our way down. Then you get on the local airline and you fly to Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city in the world. It was amazing to me that I was in Buenos Aires, as far south as I've ever been, and I got on an airplane and flew due south for another 3.5 hours to get to the southern tip of Argentina. Argentina is a big, big country. It's a long ways north to south. Then when you get to Ushuaia, that's where all the cruise ships launch from. In our case, we were the first cruise ship of the season to be going south, so we were the only one in port there. And you sail for about 2.5 days across the notorious Drake Passage. And then you get in a Zodiac, you go ashore, and you click into your skis, and off you go. It's that simple. Ushuaia is kind of a cool town, and my recommendation is if you decide to go to Antarctica, and you should, spend some extra time in Ushuaia. There's a national park there. It very quickly, just a 20-minute cab ride out of town gets you out into some beautiful, beautiful country. The picture on the left I snapped just out the window of the airplane. On the right, you see the map as we're coming down across the peninsula there and turning right down along the Beagle Channel. Who knows why it's called the Beagle Channel? Darwin's ship. There you go. Okay, door prize. But that is looking south across the Beagle Channel and across the archipelago, off the end of the world. So there it is. All that little point of the map that you've seen your whole life. You wondered what it looked like. That's what it looks like, looking off the end of the world. And who knew that Patagonia was not just a clothing brand? It is also a mountain range in South America. And Ushuaia is kind of the very southern tip of the Patagonia region. So that picture is literally taken 15 minutes outside of town. So it does not take long at all to get to some trailheads and some really beautiful hiking and skiing areas. There was a little ski area that was about 30 minutes drive from town. So the first day there, we got a cab. The guides were kind of doing their guide training thing. So the folks in our group, there were 4 of us in the group. That was kind of the ratio, 1 guide to 4 clients. So we just grabbed a cab, went out of town, went to the ski area, and skinned up to just get to know each other and to check the block of skiing in South America. I said, I am not going to be in South America with my ski equipment and not ski somewhere. So we had to do that. In the picture in the upper right, if you look very carefully, just under the clouds, in the top of that picture, you can see a little sliver of the South Atlantic. Unfortunately, you couldn't quite see the Pacific in the other direction, but it was close. That's up at about maybe 2,500 feet elevation or so. And then we got our first turns in South America, skiing on beautiful spring corn. That's the cool thing, is it's October. Skiing hasn't even started here. And then you go down there and it's, spring skiing season, which is kind of nice, pretty moderate temperatures. The next day we went out and did a shakedown with our guide. Not every guide did this. It was amazing to me. I guess there were probably some guides with clients that they knew, but I'm thinking if I were guiding a bunch of people that I'd never met on glaciers in Antarctica, I'd probably want to get to know them a little bit first. So we did that. The 4 of us plus the guide. This is hiking up. This is a small little ski area that's literally 10 minutes from the hotel in a taxi. And we went up there and practiced a little bit. From the time you get out of the Zodiac in Antarctica to the time you get back in the Zodiac, you're pretty much on glaciated terrain the whole time you're there. So as soon as you get out and take off your life preserver and get your skis on, you're roped up the whole time that you're skinning up, and then you take obviously you're unroped to ski down, but you're spending a fair amount of time traveling on skis as a rope team. And if you've never done that before, there's a little bit of an art form to managing the rope and keeping proper distance and whatnot. A little bit of practice with the ice axe and crampons. As it turned out, we never used them in Antarctica, but we did have a chance to summit a little terrain here, and that was good practice. And then most of all is to practice glacier rescue procedures. Far and away, the biggest risk of skiing in Antarctica is crevasse danger. The avalanche hazard is relatively low in the regions that we were in, but there are crevasses there. So as some of you may know that have hiked on glaciated peaks, there's a whole art form to that. So this is us heading up, getting up into the high terrain. You can see the Beagle Channel there in the background. It's kind of, when you're used to skiing in New Mexico and seeing nothing but dry desert for 100,000 square miles, it's really weird to look out and see the ocean from where you're skiing. But very cool. That was hitting our high point there, about maybe 2,500 feet or so. You'll see some of these pictures down in Antarctica, what look like enormous mountains. And they're only 2,500 to 3,000 feet because you're starting at sea level. And then this is getting some nice spring snow turns that same day. So then we finally get on the boat. Now, as I mentioned, when they first did this, it was an old Russian converted vessel, and they've been through a number of ships since then. When I first started looking at this trip, and I looked on the website, the rooms looked okay, but they were pretty Spartan. They were single bunks or whatever, and they were, it was not going to be a luxury cruise, but hey, you're going there to ski, and I figured, we could tough it out. This was a whole new ball game, and I'm really glad that I waited a few years to do this trip. This was actually the first Antarctic voyage for this ship. It had a sister ship commissioned a couple years earlier. I felt good knowing that it was a proven design. At least it had done one cruise to the Arctic, and this was its first cruise in the Antarctic. It's purpose built to take people to the polar regions. It has two cranes on the back of it for launching Zodiacs. It is, if you look carefully along the back of the towards the stern of the ship, you can see two doors right near the water line where you can board the Zodiacs and whatnot. You notice it doesn't have the typical open deck. Well, it does have an open deck, but it's up on like deck 5 or deck 6. But down lower, it's actually enclosed. You have an observation deck where even when you're going through heavy seas and waves, crashing over whatever, you're nice and enclosed and can enjoy that view without getting wet. So first impressions are everything. The first impression on this ship was a very good one. When we arrived in the piano lounge and were served our first drinks as we were waiting to get our room keys, it was evident that this was not going to be a Spartan cruise. You can see the picture in the center is the stateroom that we had. I mean, that was a pretty standard stateroom. It had it amazed me. I thought the doors, I assumed there would be a way to lock those doors so that people couldn't wander out onto the deck in rough seas, but you could. It was probably not a great idea, but you could if you wanted to. But very, very comfortable, spacious rooms. You can see that's our guide, Josh, in the upper right-hand corner, and one of the two hot tubs. It had a nice little library on the ship with a great selection of literature from Arctic and Antarctic exploration. And yes, there is a mint on your pillow every evening. So this is not like a hut trip or anything like that. The food was incredible. I guess the picture's a little bit off. You can't quite see the label in the lower right there. But if you're concerned that you're going to be gone 10 days from civilization without access to Dom Perignon, don't worry. The ship has got that covered. You can get that. Just an incredible food service. I mean, it was a really, really, really first-class operation. So after we got on the ship, we set sail down the Drake Passage. I think we had our first penguin sighting somewhere in the Drake Passage. It's hard to tell. It was a long ways away. Penguins actually do get that far north, believe it or not. But this is as we're heading south. I think the second evening at sea. Going south, we had what was called the Drake Lake, which is what you want. We had a little bit of rollers coming off the Pacific, a little bit of, this and that, but just kind of rocked you to bed at night. It was wonderful. No big deal at all. Coming north was a different story. And this is what a lot of people hear about in stories of getting to the Antarctic. The Drake Passage can be pretty rough. These were seas that were roughly 4 to 5 meters, and we sailed north a day early because the seas were forecast to get up to 10 to 15 meters. I would not, and even with that sea state, you didn't walk around the ship unless you were close to. There's a reason all those handrails are on ships because in seas like that, you truly need them. So about the middle of the second day at sea, I was sitting there in the room doing something, and they came over and made an announcement that they'd sighted their first iceberg. And I sort of leaned over and I looked out the window and I saw this thing on the horizon, like 4 or 5 miles away. And I thought, it's not going to make a very good picture. And I went back to what I was doing. And then about 3 minutes later, this 10-story building goes floating by the ship. And this is the moment where it becomes real, that you're really going to Antarctica when you see an iceberg that size go floating by. So that was just a taste of things to come. A lot of wildlife. That's one of the reasons a lot of people do this trip is the opportunity to see some unique wildlife. A lot of seabirds. If you're a bird watcher, you get a chance to check off a lot of things on your life list, like albatross. I believe that's an albatross in the upper left. And then let's see if this video will run on the right. That's a pod of orcas, but 5 of them, I think. And so you've got 2.5 days or so at sea. They do a good job of filling up that time. In the upper left there, you see doing morning yoga on the observation deck. The guides on this trip are a phenomenal array of talent. I mean, guides from all over the world: New Zealand, Chamonix, Verbier, a lot from the Alps, Norway. I mean, just a really, really diverse group of guides with some amazing backgrounds. A number of them did lectures. You can see that there's a guy named Andrew McLean who's probably been guiding in Antarctica longer than anybody, talking about it. And then the ship's crew as well had naturalists and whatnot that would give lectures on the wildlife, the birds, et cetera, the various types of penguins and whatnot. So they did a good job of filling up that time so you weren't feeling like you need to be playing shuffleboard or something during the time you're traveling south. That's the route that we took. Down our first landfall was a place called Deception Island, which is that labeled A there in that picture, and we reached that about midday on our third day on the ship, and then from there we went further south and we're in that region basically between Anvers Island and the Antarctic Peninsula itself, which is good because you're in an area that's fairly well protected, not a lot of winds, not a lot of seas and stuff. They did a good job of putting the ship places where you weren't getting buffeted around by a high sea state or anything when you're trying to sleep. So anyway, so as I said, after a couple days on the ship, you're sort of in love boat mode. You're eating 4 meals a day and going to these lectures and stuff. And then all of a sudden, it's like, game on, we're going skiing. And I love this picture, Claire and her dad, Bill, and on the left there. I love the expression on her face because it's just sort of this half crazed, oh my God, we're going to go skiing in Antarctica. So we're all pretty excited at this point. You can see in the picture at the top is going out through one of those ports, if you will, in the stern of the ship. In the back of the ship, down at the waterline level is a mudroom where, you know, your skis and all your gear and your life jacket and all that kind of stuff is stored. So, you know, you go down there, get suited up, grab your skis, go out through one of those doors and into the Zodiacs. Zodiacs will hold about 10 people. So basically two groups, you know, a guide and 4 people plus the person driving the Zodiac, and we head ashore. Deception Island. This is actually a little inlet called Whalers Bay on Deception Island. It's kind of horseshoe shaped. It's a volcanic caldera. This is the only place we actually landed on a beach. You can see kind of the black sand of that volcanic rock there. But it was also one of the few places there was any kind of infrastructure on the shore, because this is a place that operated until about 1930 as a whaling station. I mean, and you look at those tanks. I mean, those look like the fuel tanks that you see at an airport. You know, that's a lot of whale oil in those tanks. And we did see penguins for the first time. This is somebody else's picture on the right there. That was the ship's photographer. I was too focused on skiing to get a picture of a penguin when we first went ashore, but they were there. As we're getting out of the boat, you're like, yeah, by God, there really are penguins here. And then off we go and click into our skis and this first day it was kind of cloudy, as you can see at first, but it started to burn off a little bit. We're quite a bit further north. We're a couple hundred miles further north from where we're going to do most of our skiing, so it was more spring-like in those conditions. But nonetheless, our first turns in Antarctica. The next day, I forget the name of this bay, Charlotte Bay, I think it was. The next day, we're pulling into this bay about breakfast time, and this is one of the things about this trip is if you're blessed with good weather, you know, you wake up every morning, you know, you step out on deck and you look at a view like that and just go, man, I can't believe I'm here. I mean, it's just absolutely breathtaking surroundings. And so we go cruising into Charlotte Bay there, and you know, people ask, well, you know, what's the conditions like in terms of temperature? It is no different than skiing in January or February in New Mexico or Colorado. It was, you know, temperatures probably in the 30s, I would say, for the most part. You know, it was below freezing on 1 or 2 days, but basically it was pretty mild conditions. It was gorgeous ski weather. So this is how it's done. You launch. There's sort of a batting order posted, you know, there on the deck, you know, where everybody's coming out of breakfast. It says, okay, you know, this guides group, you know, what your sequence is going to be. You know, some days you may be getting off the ship at 8:30. Other days it may be more like, you know, 9 or 9:30. But a pretty easy schedule. You typically woke up about 6:45 and went up and had a sumptuous breakfast and went back and changed into your ski gear, and then sometime between 8:30 and 9:30 met up with your group and your guide, headed down to the mudroom, and then got into one of these Zodiacs. This is sort of your typical landing. It's a little bit like a marine invasion or something, because unlike that first day where we're pulling up on a nice, you know, sort of sandy beach, usually you're looking for a place where you can just stick the nose of the Zodiac in close to the rocks, and everybody goes over the bow of the Zodiac, and then you set up a bucket brigade there and start handing all the skis and whatnot out of the Zodiac. Once you get ashore, they have a shore bag with a little bit of rescue gear in case you were to get, you know, if winds came up or something and you couldn't get back to the ship immediately. And you take off your life jackets and leave all those there, get into your skis, and off you go. And there you can see this is a taken from one of the Zodiacs returning to the ship of several groups. I think I'm in that picture somewhere, but I can't swear to it. And you just head up and start looking for some ski terrain. So this is our first day out. You see the picture in the lower left. You can see the ship in the background. And we just went out and explored around some beautiful terrain. Nothing terribly steep. The skiing on this trip was not super challenging. I mean, there were a few groups there that were filming movies and stuff that went and skied a little more challenging terrain. But generally speaking, the good quality snow was on fairly low angle terrain. So it wasn't like you had to be an expert skier to ski in this environment at all. but beautiful surroundings. I mean, everywhere you look, you're just gazing out at the ocean and icebergs. So we sort of did a lap around this big terrain feature, and then back towards where we're starting. And then I would my wife will divorce me if I fail to say this, that it was not just skiers. There were snowshoers on this trip. I think there were what, a dozen or so, 14 people that were snowshoeing. So that is Celeste's group coming back on that day. On a few, there were a day or two where we couldn't ski because of um, in one case due to high winds, in one case just an inability to find good landing zones for the Zodiacs in the area that we were in. But the ship's crew was really nice. If the weather was cooperative, they would just do wildlife cruises. You just jump in the Zodiacs and go out and cruise around for an hour or so and look for penguins or sea lions or various seabirds and whatnot. So it was kind of fun to do that. So that's Celeste and I on the right there on our adventure cruise. And that's going to be my Facebook picture for life right there, skiing down on that first beautiful bluebird day. And then, eventually at the end of the day, everybody kind of heads back to the landing zone. It was a very well coordinated operation, between the ship and the guides to make sure that, no group got left on shore, and had the ship steam away. So they were very, very good about counting noses at the end of the day and getting everybody back. So this is after that second day of skiing, first one that was really bluebird. That's our guide Josh in the upper left, and a gal named Erin who's a guide out of Silverton. We had one guy from Durango and then 3 guides from Silverton, Colorado, which is a pretty good representation for one tiny little town in Colorado on this trip. So this is heading back to the ship that day. You can see the water is just, it's almost like glass. There wasn't a breath of wind. It was sort of late afternoon. The sun was getting a little bit lower in the sky. And as we got back to the ship, they announced that we would be doing the polar plunge that day, which we knew was coming, but we were expecting a few days to kind of work up our courage for that. And you can see how Celeste feels about it in that picture in the left. And she asked me as we're in our stateroom, kind of getting organized. She said, "Do I have to do this?" And I said, "No, you don't have to do this. You're just going to regret it for the rest of your life if you don't do this." So you go down and get in this line, and once you get in the line, it's sort of like you're being marched to the gallows. It's at some point there's just no turning back. You just keep going, and you go, okay, I can't turn around now. So after you've signed the waiver that you're not going to sue anybody, and they, this is where they attach a harness to you so they can pull you out of the water if you suddenly have a heart attack or something, and they have the ship's doctor standing by with an AED. But you can see the conditions were perfect for it. You're only in the water for a moment, and the bragging rights last for the rest of your life. And then once you get out, there is a steward standing there with glasses and a bottle of Stolies to give everybody a shot to warm them up when they get back on the boat. So as I said, very, very civilized. So they made a good decision to do the polar plunge on that day, because this is what the weather looked like on the next day. Much less conducive to jumping into the water. So you can see that this was, I will, in full disclosure, I didn't go skiing this morning on the morning of this. I decided to sit it out because my leg was bothering me a little bit. My group came back about lunchtime, and one of them said, "You made the right call. You didn't miss much here." And then actually the weather was kind of nasty, so nobody went out that afternoon. But you can see in the picture on the right there, they did launch kayaks. There were only 2 days that they were able to put kayaks in the water, and this was one of them. That picture with Celeste in the lower left-hand corner, that is the picture window from the sauna. So I think we made a good call. Rather than being out there freezing in the kayak, we were sitting in the sauna watching the kayaking. So, but again, the next day, again, bluebird sky again, gorgeous weather, and we're right back at it. The picture you see there in the lower right, that is our guide beginning a descent. We were told when we left the ship They said no one has been over to this region before, but if you guys want to go check it out, have at it. So we and our boat buddies, I think there, at least our two groups, maybe another one or two, went over there. So someone can prove us wrong someday, but until such time as they do, we are claiming first tracks ever on this zone in Antarctica. And that is one of the reasons that you go, is for those kind of bragging rights. This is our group finishing up that lap and getting ready to go up again. You look at those mountains in the background. That's kind of what I was talking about. That looks like, the high Sierras or, 14ers in Colorado or something. Those mountains are no more than 3,500 feet, but starting at sea level. So the terrain looks really big. It's really not, but it's very, very beautiful surroundings. This was the day to be going out kayaking. Beautiful calm weather and just gorgeous, gorgeous blue skies. So there was a group that was lucky to get out. The building you see there, this is at a place called Port Lockroy, which is a UK research station that operates for about 4 months in the summertime. It claims to be the southernmost post office in the world. You could leave postcards there, and they would postmark them and mail them back to you. At some future date. There was nobody there at the time. But what was there was penguins. Gen 2 penguins are migratory. They go north in the wintertime, and then at some point in the spring they come back. The males come back, and then they basically seek out the same breeding ground where they were born, and they come back to that same breeding ground to have their lay eggs and nest for their young, and then the female penguins come back a couple of weeks later. We happened to be there the day this migration was starting to take place. When we went ashore, there were about half a dozen penguins there, and by the time we finished up skiing, there were hundreds of penguins there. The penguin is a very hydrodynamic creature. I mean, those suckers can move underwater. That picture in the low them going underneath the Zodiac. The water's incredibly clear. I mean, you could be in 6 or 8 feet of water and see straight through to the bottom. It's like being in the Bahamas or something. The water was so clear. And then this is your obligatory penguin video here. So, um, one of the things that almost every cruise ship in this air going down on that portion of the Antarctic Peninsula will do is to cruise down or through what's called the Lemire Channel. It's just it's only about 300 yards wide at its narrowest point. And it's just it's a really beautiful place to be. Some friends of ours were in Antarctica about 3 weeks later and got a picture approaching this with the setting sun, just setting the whole horizon afire. And I couldn't find that picture to put in this presentation, but that's the best I could do. But we actually cruised down almost to the Lemire Channel and then turned around and sailed back north again, because the skiing we were trying to get to was further north. But we did get to go down to see that famous point, and that's the ship. Somebody had a drone, obviously, to get that picture, but when this was a big event. Everybody was up on that deck, and they were serving hot chocolate and schnapps and whatnot as we cruised down to the Lemire Channel. And that is our guide dropping into that zone that we're claiming first tracks for, with the ship there in the distance. And that's why you go, so you can brag about being the first one to ski a slope in Antarctica. So that is it. I throw it open to questions from the audience. Yeah. Okay, I thought someone might ask that. So the question is, if you're roped up going up, how do you know you're not going to fall into a crevasse going down? Well, that's one of the reasons you're paying a guide is to is to avoid obvious open. In our case, when we're skinning up, I don't recall ever seeing an open crevasse. The whole time. So there are snow bridges in the crevasses. That's part of the beauty of having skis on. You've got 6 foot long skis on, distributing your weight, much like skiing on glaciers in Europe. Is it possible to break through a snow bridge on a crevasse? It is, but the likelihood is much lower, because of the speed that you're going and the way your weight is distributed. But the other answer to that is you're paying attention as you're going up and looking to make sure you're not in a heavily crevassed area when you're skiing down. Sure. AT skis, yes. Yeah, pretty much. I think there were 1 or 2 people that were on telemark gear, and there were a fair number of people that were on split boards. So there were some snowboard groups that were split boarding. The snow, how are the snow conditions? This was the earliest that they have done this trip. When they've done this trip in the past, it was usually about the first week in November. So this was a couple weeks earlier than they normally run the trip. And their only concern was being able to get to landing zones, making sure that there wasn't pack ice blocking landing zones. I remember reading during our winter or excuse me, during our summer, their winter, that the ice was that it was a low ice year in Antarctica. So that turned out not to be a factor. And the skiing was fantastic. The snow was the guides that have been doing this for years and years said it was the best snow that they'd encountered. So yeah, great snow conditions. They are loud. That's an interesting question. The soundscape. I mean, it's pretty quiet. It's pretty, there obviously there's no other than, the people you're with, there's no airplanes flying over you're not hearing the ship or anything. So it's, yeah, it feels like wilderness. It feels like wilderness. Even when you're on the ship, looking ashore, it's just it is a vast, beautiful emptiness. So yeah. But yeah, when you're around penguins, you'll know it. First of all, you'll smell them and you'll hear them for sure. Go ahead. Oh, good question. How many people on the ship? There were, I believe, 117 clients and 33 guides, and then there were about 80 ship's crew on top of that. So a pretty small group, really. We did not see another ship the whole time we were there. Which was kind of cool. I was told by ship's crew that even in the height of the season, when there's multiple ships down there, the ships communicate with each other and they try to avoid each other. They want you to have that experience of being there and having that wilderness to yourself. So they steer clear. But I suspect in the height of the season you probably would encounter other ships. But as I said, we were the first of the season, so we had the peninsula entirely to ourselves.
We have a few questions from the online crew.
Yes, Zoomland.
The first was somebody said that they think it should have been called the penguin plunge rather than the polar plunge. But there was a question about what the temperature was during that polar plunge. Do you know the temperature of the air and the water?
The air temperature I'm going to guess was probably in the mid 30s. The water temperature, because it's salt water, I'm guessing was probably slightly below what we would call freezing, 32. I think the water temperature was about 30 degrees. So it was cold, but it was brief.
No, thank you. And then somebody else asked, what camera did you use on this adventure?
I was carrying a Nikon Z6 mirrorless camera. I've gotten on trips like this. I've decided it's worth it to carry a big full-size camera. So.
And then can you tell us where the ship is in this photo up here?
It's just slightly right in the top quarter or so of the picture, and slightly right of center. If you see that little peninsula sticking out in the upper right, just beyond it, you see that little black kind of cigar-shaped sliver. That's the ship. Yeah, so we'd actually gone a fair distance away from the ship on that Zodiac. So
All right, and the final question I have from Zoomland is, do you have your next once-in-a-lifetime adventure planned out yet? Do you have an idea of what you're doing?
I'm finally going to go ski British Columbia. Well, I'm going to the San Juans tomorrow. That's my next ski trip. But actually going to ski in the Selkirk Mountains in British Columbia next year. So that's another bucket list item. But I am planning to eventually go ski the Atlas Mountains. I'm planning to go to Japan next year because everybody has to go ski Japan. So I just need to go ski the Atlas Mountains in Morocco and New Zealand, and then I will be able to claim all 7 continents. Sure. I'm sorry? That's a great question. I slept through it. I don't. I guess. I mean. I guess was it usually. I guess it was dark by the time we went to bed. But I was so focused on being well rested to ski that it's a good cry. I mean, I would have loved to. I've had to get up on hut trips in the Alps in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and marveled at the night sky. On board ship, I never, the bathroom was right there, so I never stepped out onto the deck at nighttime. I kind of wish I had, but yeah, I wish I had a better answer than that. Yeah, next trip. Did they explain the ship design? I read a little bit about it, and it's supposed to be a little, provide a little bit more stability in rough seas, other than the obvious, having an enclosed observation deck. But the design of the bow is designed to make it a little bit more stable in rough seas. But I not being a nautical engineer, I can't give you a better answer than that. But
All right, I think that might be all of our questions for the evening.
Okay. Well, again, I appreciate the invite. It was an amazing trip, and it's a lot of fun to talk about. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for sharing your adventure with us tonight. Everyone, please remember to look out for that quick survey coming to your emails. Check out the Peak website for some more upcoming spring programming. And thank you all for coming this evening. Have a good night.